Hello, and welcome to our municipality. We're a student-run podcast exploring local government, politics, and advocacy. I'm Kylie, and I'm here today with Sam and special guest Fran Wilson. So, you've started to advocate for an issue you care about. Maybe it's climate justice or more funding for local schools or something else. Maybe you've even built a small team around you. You've hit a few hundred followers on social media. You've survived your first month. Congrats! But how do you move forward from here? And this is where our guest Fran comes in. He works with startup movements and organizations on something called leadership sustainability to help make sure that they can sustain their momentum long term. So, Fran, could you tell the audience a little bit about the work you do, maybe how you learned to do that work, and what you do now?
Hey, thanks. Hey, everybody. So I'm Fran Wilson. I'm an Akron, Ohio native. And for the past 5 or 6 years, I've been living in South Central Kentucky, China, and Denmark. And I've been working and traveling and doing research in the youth political space all throughout that time in lots of different capacities. I really got into organizing junior year. That was when I did my first organizing project. And I'll tell you about that in a second. But I learned to organize freshman year. I went to a US-China bridge building camp. So it brought together a bunch of people who were in the US-China political space, a bunch of nerds studying lots of different languages. And we all packed our bags and went to UC Berkeley for a week. And we got in this little room and we learned about organizing from Marshall Gann's theory. Marshall Gans is a prolific Harvard professor, organizer for Cesar Chavez, and a great labor worker and union worker and advocate. So we learned about his capacity building efforts, how to build a movement, how to build relationships, tell successful stories. And that's what got me started in organizing. And today I'm really excited to talk about the sustainability of organizing and to tell my story about some of the projects that I've worked on, like my junior year project and my senior year projects, and to talk about the gaps in youth organizing power and capacity. So yeah, let's get started.
Awesome. And I just want to say, I think that your work is absolutely amazing. And also what I wouldn't give to live in Denmark and China. That's amazing. But one of the things we were wondering is what types of organizations do you work with, and what are their missions, and what level do they operate on, et cetera?
Yeah, for sure. So I've worked with a lot of different sizes of organizations over the last few years. I graduated college in 2019 down in Kentucky. And since then, I've been working in different capacities. But I'll start off with my project junior year. I united a lot of students around organizing for a 10-year plan for the university. In 2018, 2017, the University of Western Kentucky was doing a 10-year plan to understand student voice, to understand the issues on campus, and to recalibrate the budget and staffing priorities. And out of a 100-person committee, there were only 2 students. And this was a problem that we see a lot on university campuses. And I recognize that problem. And I immediately went to the president and the collaborative board, and I demanded that we have more of a voice. I soon got together a little group of students, and we did a survey that collected thousands and thousands of data points from over 3,000 students on campus. And we were able to push that into the committee and make sustainable change. And that's really that's the first organization I got started, and one that mirrors a lot of the youth building that we see in our everyday lives, which is loose organizing that has usually no money involved. It's out of necessity and willpower, and often things don't really meet their final goals. So that's the first organization, I guess, that I worked with, the first team. Later, my senior year, I organized and did a lot of coffee talks around youth issues like racism, policing, and education and jobs in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And that was another looser organization. But along the way, I've worked with a lot of smaller local nonprofits around health and actually sustainability, like energy sustainability, food pantry, because I myself have faced food insecurity and I know what that's like. And I have also been from congressional level to the local tiny city and council level. I've helped young minority candidates run for office. And that is a movement, and that's a campaign, and that also is a form of an organization as well, and a form of organizing. So those are the different levels that I've been a part of, and I imagine we'll dive in a little bit deeper of those.
Very interesting. So one of the things that stood out to me in what you said there, Fran, was that some of these organizations don't really have money, and that might be something that is a little bit jarring to some of our audience members. So besides that, or even including that, what are some of the issues that these organizations typically run into?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to elevate the fact that a lot of youth organizing is not around money, but a lot of the outcomes of that organizing has a money-related goal or intent. While we might not have a lot of resources ourselves to do the organizing, to move forward that goal, the end product is usually having to do with a university budget needs to be changed or allocated. Money needs to be allocated away from the police to other, organizations or departments within a local government, things like that. Those are two examples of money not being our resource, but at being the end goal. Another big problem is understanding capacity. Money is a capacity thing. Money helps us build our resources. People help us build our resources. But even if you have a big team, it doesn't mean that you necessarily understand the capacity of that team. By capacity, I mean your physical and mental and emotional ability to take one thing to the next step, to take that next step to the end goal. And it is often in our lack of understanding or lack of appreciation or respect of capacity and our team's capacity that we fall short, that we burn out, or that we're not able to meet our goal or pivot to another goal when we learn new things. So those are often what I pinpoint as main issues in youth organizing. So money, resources, team, and capacity.
No, I think that's a really good point you bring up about capacity, because, the first campaign that I worked on, one of our other co-hosts, Matthew Mitnick, his city council campaign, that was one of the things that we had to learn pretty quickly was, we got a team together. They were all students. Now, Kylie was actually, I think everybody except for Natalia, who was a co-host in municipality, was also on this campaign. One of the things we had to figure out was, what exactly are we doing? Like, we have all these people together. That's great. What do we do from there? So I think that's a really, really good point that you bring up. But what are some mistakes, I put in quotes, that you see organizations typically make? Like, things that are maybe that they regret later. And what do you recommend to overcome those?
Yeah, for sure. I think organizing is about experimenting. And while there is a lot of rule books and education to be had about how to organize and how to do it right, and how to mobilize in the right ways and tell the right story and get to the right goal, we have to experiment. And we have to understand that through organizing and through experimenting in organizing, that we're going to fail at some points and we're going to make mistakes. And so I think that's one mistake that often organizers make, is that everything has to be perfect and that you can't experiment. I think another important thing is the capacity of the leader or the point person. Often, especially in youth organizing, because we mirror organizations and people that are bold in history, bold in our education, civil rights leaders that have led us into the new generation, our organizing, even at the youth level, mirrors that because we want it to succeed. So we look up to those people. But often what we don't see is that behind, Martin Luther King Jr., behind John Ossoff, behind Obama, all these people, behind them is a team, a network, donors. It's a whole elaborate system. And so while youth organizing might not have a lot of capacity to build a massive system, we have to recognize that it's not just about the one person at the top making all the decisions. You have to have a team around you, and you have to know when is the time to lead, when is the time to step back, when is the time to pass on your leadership role and promote somebody else.
Definitely. And I'm so glad I get to respond to that and ask the next question here, because I, for some of you who know on this podcast already, I am the HR person, the human resources person. And I find a lot of what I do in organizing or even like business startups that I'm in is kind of like being the point of contact between the team, everyone in the movement, and that point person that everyone thinks about and sees as like the public face. So it's so much that I resonated with in what you just said, Fran, because I'm the one who's like, no, we can't make that person's day all meetings. We can't do this. We can't do that. We need to diffuse the responsibility here a little bit so that everyone can be like succession planned and move up in the organization should they need to, et cetera, et cetera. So I definitely see that as something that's so, so important. And to the extent that I like basically want to build my career around it. So I was just like jumping at the bit when you brought that up. So if it's not already clear, I hate to move on from that topic, but the next thing that we wanted to ask you about is kind of looking at things from a timeline point of view. Is there a point where like an organization gets going and then if they make it to that point, they're like not home free, but their odds are just so much better? And like, what does that look like in your mind?
For sure. So I am a Capricorn, and I am also ENTJ. So I am all about that timeline business, okay? Setting realistic goals and trying to meet them. Yes, please. I do. So you mentioned, how do we set up for success? How do we do that? What are the, some of the keys to making sure that we are set up for sustainability? I think I want to give some key factors to sustainability. I want to list out some key factors to sustainability organizing. So you want to have a clear understanding of where the power is at before you move anywhere. Where is the power? I think a lot of us, especially in youth organizing or young candidates running for office, we have this glorified understanding of government and where power is at. I insist that everybody do a little bit of research before they get into anything. Understand who's pulling the strings, who's actually manipulating and charging the budgets, who's in charge of bringing the budgets to council and clarifying them and approving them. Those are different examples of money, for one instance. But to get anywhere, to get to any endpoint, you have to have a very clear goal in mind, and understanding where the power is at is the number one priority. And from then, you can make on real change. So my second key is that when you start to organize on your first day, you want to make sure that you are set up for your last day. This is something that I learned when I started to organize, is that every end goal has to have a next goal. You might have the goal to defund the police in your university. You do some research, you find the power, like we just mentioned, and you realize that we might have to edit that a little bit. We might have to defund a particular office within the police department. Okay, we gotten that far. Now, after that is all over, what happens? Is the movement going to continue after defunding? Is there going to be an organization after this? What if you fail? Is this going to go on for 3 years? Is this, what's going to happen? So set yourself up for the success or the failure of the last day on your first day. And then once you do the research, you know where the power's at, you know what the end goal and even the goal after that is, win or lose. You can start to put together a team, you can start to craft a message, and you can start to set some realistic goals. And number 4, when you set goals, make sure, like we just talked about, they have a timeline, a concrete timeline. Put it on your Google Calendar. Put it on that calendar that is on your desk that you never use, but it's still there. So put it on there. Make realistic goals that have time relations, have team member responsibilities to them, have check-ins once a week. So you make sure that you're doing the work, because most of us, to be honest, in the organizing work very last minute. So you want to make sure that you're doing those 4 things. Finding the power, thinking of your last day and planning for it, crafting a message and building your team, and setting realistic, real goals. That's really the beginning and the roots of making an organization successful. And there are lots of other things to that, but that's really the core of it.
So I'm really glad that you mentioned the setting goals part of that, because, well, first of all, I'm an ENFP, so timelines are just about the exact opposite of what I do. I'm the, you tell me what to do and I'll do whatever it takes to get it done. What comes after that is beyond me. And timelines, I'm a history major. I should be good at this stuff, but timelines are just, I can't do them. I'm so bad with timelines and like when things should be done. That's definitely something I need to work on in my organizational sphere. But yeah, and I'm sure Kylie is cringing at that, being our timeline HR person. So one of the other things we were curious about is what are some ways that organizations you encounter organize their leadership and membership? Because we know that, you know, it's a lot of people think there's kind of that one way of organization for their leadership. But you would also mention that a lot of organizations and movements you work with are decentralized. So we were curious about that.
Yeah, so membership takes lots of different forms. And what I've seen is really 2 kind of ways. Either you pay to be a member or you show up to be a member. And, you know, that could be in the form of donations. That could be in the form of buying a product or buying, you know, merch or something within that organizational structure. And the other one is showing up. So a lot of these decentralized, that's a great word. A lot of these decentralized organizations, you know, they're not registered with the state, you know, they're not, you know, a student campus, they're pop-up, low budget, youth-run organizations, which is perfectly fine and absolutely legal and has a lot of, you know, great workaround. A lot of the membership like that is showing up to be a member. So going to the meetings, putting your face on a poster or posting on social media, showing up to a march, a lot of these things. And I think, especially in the world of COVID and post-COVID too, organizing is going to be very different. And organizing capacity is going to be different, and team building and membership building is going to be different. So I think we're going to see some interesting creative ways to show up, whether that's joining a live or listening to a great podcast by your friends like this one. Yeah, that's right. This is a great podcast. And there's a lot of different ways to show up, and we have to be flexible when we make our organizations, when we create and when we change our organizations, to understand that we have to meet people where they're at, but also make an ask to step that forward, to make sure that they are showing up either monetarily or physically or emotionally.
Completely. So over the course of this conversation, we've talked about certain things that are super important to do. We've talked about making that ask a little bit, which you just kind of went over. Is there any other key points of advice that you would want to give to someone who wants to do this type of work, who wants to start an organization or movement?
So some of the keys that I particularly have learned from organizing on student campuses or working with young people running for office there's a couple poignant lessons that I've learned over the years. And one of them is to make asks that are real and tangible and make sense for the people that you're asking for. So I'll give an example. A lot of times when we're starting an organization, we're starting a march, or we're organizing a coffee shop talk, or we're making a podcast, we have these very specific asks that we have for people to show up, either, like we just said, monetarily or physically, right? We want to make sure that that ask is tangible and real. And by that, I mean, don't just ask people to listen to your podcast. We're asking people to subscribe. That's tangible. It's measurable. We see that impact. We see it on the back end too. When we're making asks, we want to make sure that we're meeting people where they're at. But like I just said, we're pushing people just a little bit forward so that our organization can benefit and that our goal eventually is met. And it takes a keen eye, but mostly a good listening ear. A lot of times in organizing, we're so burdened or excited with our goal, with our team, with our mission, that we forget to listen to people when we make asks of them. You see a lot of campaigns asking for money consistently. One beautiful ask that I have seen recently by the Nina Turner campaign for Congress in Ohio is that if you're able to donate, please do. And if you can, there's an option for $3 donations in a congressional level campaign that brings in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars just within one payment period. That's meeting people where they're at while also pushing it just a little bit forward, making it accessible, making that ask achievable and real for that person by offering an easy way to participate monetarily. So that's one thing, making a real and tangible, measurable ask. Another really important lesson that I've learned is checking in. A key part of sustainability in my mind, it mirrors the origin of the word sustainability, meeting the needs of today without compromising the needs of tomorrow. What does that mean? That means that our organization has to reflect meeting the needs of today while also working towards tomorrow. That means that we have to be real with what's going on in our today. That means that we have to check in with our teammates every day or once a week, see where they're at, and build that capacity each day towards that end goal. A lot of youth organizing power fizzles, booms, sparks up, creates a fire, and then fades. And this is because we don't keep sustainability in mind. Check in with your teammates, see where they're at. We're in COVID. There's no more challenge in our time than organizing during a global pandemic where friends and families and neighbors are dying, being shot by the police unwarrantedly, are having to go into work in an unsafe working condition just to pay rent. We need check-ins more now than ever, and a check-in can be a text to say hello. A check-in can be, hey, did you finish that project? What do you need from me to get there? So we have to keep our asks real and tangible and measurable. We have to remember the needs of today while also working towards the needs of tomorrow by checking in with the teammates and the people who are helping us make change. And maybe lastly, tell your story. Tell a story of you, of your organization, of your community, and tell it boldly. We need now and tomorrow and the next day to hear why this matters, why it matters to us, to you, to me and you, to our community, and why it matters for tomorrow. So make that real ask. Make sure you're working sustainably and checking in, and tell your story.
Wow. I'm going to be honest with you, Fran. I have goosebumps, and that's not just me buttering you up. I genuinely had goosebumps for just about all of that. That was, I mean, I don't think I could have asked for a better way to end this episode. So my gosh, thank you so much for your powerful words. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you for sharing the work you do. And thank you for doing the work you do. One of the reasons I was so excited to have you on and record this episode is because, I mean, there is still so much for me to learn about organizing, and it's something I want to get good at. So, wow, I'm going to probably have to listen to this a few times. So thank you so much once again. And thank you to everyone for listening to this episode. We hope you'll reach out to us on our social media, which we have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And stay tuned for our upcoming episodes. We're so glad you could join us today, and we hope to see you again soon in our municipality.